Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming back. Hopefully you enjoyed the break and also the videos. We got very nice comments from people already. So thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. And we hope that you were also able to follow the previous sessions from the morning, which focused on taking stock in addressing a long history of anti-Gypsyism, but also on learning from expert commissions on anti-Gypsyism in Sweden and in Germany, and paving the way for truth and reconciliation processes in Romania and in Spain. Also, if you're not able to follow us, please note that you're able to do so on our Twitter at CHACHIPEN EU, or on our live YouTube feed at 15th International Roma Day towards Justice and Building Trust /SEPS. And also an announcement that we didn't make previously. It's that there's also a parallel event that is being organized by the Harvard University together with the Swedish University and also with other partners in April on the 14th, 17th, and 7th of April. Having said that, our session this afternoon, it's going to focus on another important aspect, which for Ergo, if you asked us, it's the most important aspect, which is about speaking about the struggle of civil society in addressing anti-Gypsyism and in mobilizing bigger social movements to enable adequate state response to anti-Gypsyism, but also to enable the establishment of truth and reconciliation processes. So here today we have with us very honorable speakers, many of whom are also contributors, partners, but also national coordinators within the CHACHIPEN project. We will have a chance to discuss with all of them separately. We will also have a chance to answer questions. So please use the Q&A function that you have there and at the end of this screen. And so we can also, I'm also inviting the speakers to, if they can, to take also a minute and scroll through the questions, and if relevant, they can also write in the chat the answers. If not, we will also come back to these questions at the end of the session, and we'll try to take as many as we can. I think it's also important to come back to what the CHACHIPEN does as well when it comes to the empowerment of civil society to advocate for truth and reconciliation processes. It is at the very core of the CHACHIPEN project, this very aspect, and the project also aims to build the capacities of Romani activists and civil society to take part in the design and implementation and monitoring of such transition-like policies, but also hopefully contribute to other parallel processes which are happening in Europe today and at national level in particular, which are the design of the national Roma inclusion strategies. So hopefully also today from our speakers, we would be able to hear both from their role within the CHACHIPEN project, but also their work when it comes to the broader fight against anti-Gypsyism, their own struggles within the movement, but also their contributions to it, and also links between different policies that are taking place at national and EU level, especially between this EU framework for Roma equality, inclusion, and participation, and the EU action plan against racism. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the first speaker on the agenda, which is Mr. George Jovanovic, the president of the European Roma. The word for the European Roma Rights Center is to say that is a key stakeholder within the Roma civil society movement when it comes to defending the rights of the Roma before national and European human rights courts. It set important legal precedents when it comes to the fight against discrimination and anti-Gypsyism. So therefore, their role and contribution is quite unique to all of us. So Georgia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I will talk a little bit today about my organization and what we do. I think that a lot of you might know, but maybe it's important to go through some of the details. So yes, European Roma Rights Center is somehow different from most of the organization that we see in the Roma movement. And that is because we are having this Roma rights approach. So ERRC is organization that since its establishment promotes Roma rights and not aid for Roma. A human rights approach in which we use litigation and other rights-based advocacy fights the root causes and shifts the burden onto public authorities to respect Roma rights, and dismissing this idea that the burden is on us Roma to integrate. DRC sees Roma as rights holders and not passive subjects that states should help based on strategies and political goodwill. DRC sees Roma as agents of change, achieving dignity, equality, and full respect of our human rights, and using our experience to contribute to the more just and sustainable world. We need to use our rights wherever and whenever we can to achieve the change. And ERC is not seeking to dictate when and where Roma should use our rights. Instead of that, we show Roma the power of mobilizing around rights in and out of the court. We know most people think that going to court to achieve a change will take a long time. And in many cases, this is true. But we can and have achieved quick results to a rights-based approach and are determined to get faster and powerful victories. And we are not falling into the populist trap of looking for a quick fix, nor into some lawyers or strategies, fantasies that we can predict our outcome in advance if our cases or other interventions are staged cleverly enough. Anything worth achieving, anything that sparks a movement is, in most cases, very unpredictable. And ultimately, it goes beyond a control of any NGO or funder. In our work, ERC partners with around 600 named Romani litigants in more than over 150 cases. Around 30 NGOs and 40 lawyers are included in this work. These are people and organizations with whom we are bringing dynamic, radical litigation using arguments and approaches driven by activism, not necessarily legal theory or strategies framed by the law school training. These partnerships go beyond what lawyers or activists on their own could work and produce. Our lawyers, partners who are interested increasingly also Roma themselves, stand at the edge of their profession. They don't play the game of judicial respectability or engagement in endless theoretical lawyer talk. Like our litigants and NGO partners are like us, they are driven by a deep commitment to achieve equality and by knowledge that practicing the law in the usual way is not going to get us there. In many of the countries where we work, this kind of radical lawyering produced by a combination of international and local activists and lawyers was previously unthinkable. Many of our lawyers and activist partners have been criticized by their colleagues for the work they do with us. And through this radical partnership, we will achieve the changes that no judge, legal scholar, or any expert can have predicted. This is something that we usually do in our everyday life. I'm also willing later, if there are any questions, to explain to people what necessarily strategic litigation is and why we have around 150 cases, because sometimes people think that, you know, this number is small and some people think this number is huge, but you know, these are like more details that, you know, I could explain a little bit later if people are interested into these details. Other than that, that's from my side for now, Isabella. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And this was an excellent time management. You finished 1 minute earlier, so I can only congratulate you. I think it is key what you have mentioned, because many times we hear about the amazing work that ERRC does, but we talk less about the methods that ERRC employs in actually working with the plaintiffs, where, as someone would call, the victims of discrimination, but also in the way you empower NGOs to know about the rights-based approach and help them engage themselves at national level, and what you call strategic litigation. And we might have to come back to it, so you might explaining while we start our discussion on the difference between more traditional litigation and the strategic type of litigation that ERRC does, and why is this key in actually trying to achieve sustainable results on the ground. I would now want to move to our next speaker, who is Mrs. Timea Junghaus, the director of the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture. And again, it's important to have Timea with us and to have ERIAC with us, because ERIAC has such an amazing, unique mandate and expertise when it comes to the work to promote Roma identity, culture, and history. We count so much on you and the work of your organization, Timea, to help us eradicate and diminish or minimize the negative prejudices and stereotypes against Roma, and to promote this positive narrative about Roma that we are missing so much within this debate. So I look forward to hear your intervention and about the amazing work you do, but also maybe about the challenges that you see that civil societies and partners you work with have and struggle with when it comes to pushing this positive narrative or creating their own space within these mainstream spaces that we kind of try and be there. So thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabella, and also thank you for the invitation to the organizers. Your Excellencies, dear audience, and my dear colleagues, naturally, I will reflect on the topic of reconciliation and truth from a cultural perspective. And I must provoke you with simply stating that combating anti-Gypsyism gives us only a definition of the problem. The proven experience of the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture is that we cannot combat anti-Gypsyism without a rich cultural munition, a positive vision, but an effective counter-narrative and a strong counter-representation is a must. What is happening to Roma in the form of discrimination, exclusion, anti-Gypsyism is just a proxy of a cultural war that is taking place in Europe. So let's shortly examine the situation of the cultural right and cultural recognition of Roma in Europe. Roma have been present and integral part of the societies in Europe for over 600 years, as we all know. Throughout this history, Roma have made an immense contribution contribution to national cultures, while managed to develop strategies to preserve the resilient Roma cultural heritage, artifacts, traditions, occupations, languages, as a strategy of survival amidst a history of continuous persecution, discrimination, and violence. Without policies and institutions, Roma art forms and tangible heritage are being appropriated by the majority societies without a proper recognition of the Roma cultural producers. There are, as we know, no state level or European level policies to counter the unjust process of cultural appropriation. Then I would call your attention to the fact that the institutions for Roma pride and recognitions, museums, cultural centers, concert halls, publishers are either missing or are practicing Roma representation in precarious situations. We can all name the maximum 4 institutions that are more stable than others in Europe. The Roma oral traditions, performing arts, social practices, ritual, festive events, knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe, or the knowledge and skills to produce traditional crafts is uncollected, underestimated, or misinterpreted by non-Roma stereotyping, scholarship, and knowledge production institutions without the corrective impact of Roma themselves. And Roma culture is theorized into the outdated concept of low culture. Many public collections, archives, museums, and national cultural institutions have funding to acquire Roma artworks, but since these collections do not form an integral part of the institutional narratives, they are not exhibited in permanent exhibition. The first depictions about Roma appeared in Northern Renaissance around 1490, and for 600 years, Roma depiction remained the monopoly of non-Roma. The cultural artifacts and cultural history items about the ancestors of the current European Roma generations are research collected, catalogued, preserved, and archived, not with the names of the Roma people, who are the owners of this cultural heritage, but with the names of the researchers, collectors, and ethnographers, folklorists. Based on these observations, we can simply state that that Roma culture and cultural heritage is in danger. It is an endangered European cultural heritage, and this has tragic consequences around Europe. Because us, the Roma minority, has no access to our own cultural heritage. Both the resilient Roma cultural heritage and the contemporary cultural production is in danger without proper strategies of recognition, collection, presentation, and conservation strategies. And Roma cultural histories and heritage are still invisible and unwritten, and the question of Roma access to Roma cultural heritage remains unaddressed. So, robust investment into Roma arts and culture history and identity should maximize the impact of other policy efforts in other areas. Without this approach, galvanizing public support and political will for the needed investment into Roma inclusion will continue to remain absent. And let me be clear about this. Investment into the field of Roma culture is not a value only in and of itself. It needs to be understood as a strategy that enables all other efforts in the remaining priority areas to have impact. So we Roma and the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture have a rather tall order. Through ERIAC's international networking of organization and its membership of 153 entities, ERIAC is ready to consult, support, and make continued efforts. The true combating of anti-Gypsyism is the recognition of the power, potential, and pride contained in the concept of being a Roma. The counterculture that combats racism and anti-Gypsyism is accepting that Roma are qualified and eager to take the leading role in shaping their own future. The counter-representation disseminates the highest quality standards in arts and culture. It demonstrates the Roma respect for diversity in our communities. These principles are the founding principles of ERIAC. They stand in front of you as the pillars of a potent strategy for diversity and prosperity in the future. To take up the mission of aiming for reconciliation means to give forms of positive and empowering, genuine visions about us Roma. And this is indispensable for the nurturing of a next generation, not only Roma, but also Europeans who are aware of our interdependencies and mutual contributions, connected histories, and inseparable futures. Thank you so much, Isabella, for your work with the moderation.
Thank you so much, Timea. And again, you are so great in keeping time. I hope I'll be able to be so. Although you have a bleak overview of where we are in terms of Roma art, culture, and our identity heritage, it is important that we know it. It is important that we are very aware. And I think ERIAC, through its members and partners, has such a potential to help us restore some of it and maintain some of it before it's too late. But it's an important warning for all of us that we have to do more and better. Thank you so much, Timea. Now I would like to continue with our next speakers, who is Mr. Julie Pasco. Julie is also a former colleague that I have worked with very closely. Julie, it's great to have you here. She is the Senior Advocacy Officer for the European Network Against Racism. And it's so important to have Ina here today with us because it kind of helps us create this bridge between the Roma movement and the larger anti-racism movement that Ina is the core of. Ina has an important the rights and showing the discrimination that different racialized minorities in Europe are suffering from, but also in mobilizing various anti-racism movements to have a common voice when it comes to the larger EU agenda on anti-racism. Julie, it would be so important to hear more about your work in trying to do exactly that, in trying to mobilize the various groups in coming together, and maybe also if you could speak about links that you see in terms of policy work between the EU Roma framework, but also the larger EU anti-racism action plan. Within the context, if you can also maybe have some reflections of the truth and reconciliation processes. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Isabella, for this amazing facilitation. First, I want to say that I'm really honored to be with you in such a panel with prominent Roma activists. So I've been working at INA for more than 10 years now, and for already some years, I've been supporting the advocacy around the fight against anti-Gypsyism. And I must say, all the work I've been doing with you all has inspired a lot my activism and the way I do my work at INA. It has helped me to deepen my understanding on racism generally. So I really want to acknowledge that and to acknowledge all the work that has been done for all these years around the issue of anti-Gypsyism, even though it's far from being perfect and there's still a lot of work to be done. But really in Europe, I think the Roma activism has inspired a lot the fight against racism. So I want to say that first, like to tell a bit more about INA and how we do advocacy around racial equality and racial justice. So we are a network, and our core work is to advocate towards the EU institutions on these issues. And we also facilitate exchange among CSOs because we are a network of more than 150 organizations. And then what is quite unique about INA is that we are representing a lot of different groups at risk of racism in Europe, be them Jews, Muslims, Black people, Roma, Asian people, migrants, etc. So we have worked a lot on specific forms of racism. This was also some of our focus because it was also a way to empower minority-led organizations, also to bring more visibility on these the specificities of racism, and to ensure that specific policies are addressing these specificities. So we have contributed a lot to support CSOs on the visibility of what they were experiencing and what they were naming. For example, in the fight against anti-Gypsyism, we have also released a book actually on anti-Gypsyism and the different dimensions of it. And we have, as I was mentioning, supported a lot the activism and the advocacy around the adoptions of EU frameworks. So as a unique place in the anti-racist movement, having a unique place, is also trying to build bridges across different racialized groups to also kind of ensure that the visibility of the common oppression that all these racialized groups are encountering is still there. Because the only way also to fight historical, structural, institutional forms of racism is also to have the ability to connect all these different oppressions, all these different experiences that are the result of racialization of groups in Europe. And this is also what we are trying to do, especially in Europe, where we see sometimes in some contexts where governments try to pit one group against another. And that's also where we think our role is very important to bring this visibility, to show the links, for example, when it comes to historical persecutions, how there are common patterns of racialization. And I would like also to highlight two main elements that we really stress on when advocating for racial justice. One is participation, and another one is intersectionality. And I think these two elements are also crucial in this conversation around truth and reconciliation. Participation is central because it's also a way to ensure that there is an acknowledgement that Roma have been excluded for centuries, have been even the target of policies, and as a result, we're not included, we're totally excluded from any policy processes. It's also an acknowledgement that corrective measures need to be implemented so that Roma are fully represented and fully included in decision-making, in holding power. Because in the end, racism is about power, is about like racializing groups and putting an hierarchy and ensuring that these groups are inferior. So participation is really crucial to actually fight against systemic racism. And that's really where actually we see that the first EU framework was totally missing the point, at least at the beginning, because anyway, the starting point was a willingness from government and dominant groups to actually manage the Roma. And as a result, seeing Roma only as beneficiaries and not having to have a say in the project, in the design of national strategies, etc. I remember the strong advocacy we had to make with colleagues like Ergo and Central Rat on recognition of anti-Gypsyism, and recognition of the root cause of exclusion was racism. I remember this was really a long lasting work. And now participation is at the center of the new EU framework. It's even in the title. So we really want, in order to ensure that anti-Gypsyism is really tackled, and we really see significant impact of this framework, which we failed to see before, is really to ensure that this actually leads to tangible measures, tangible results when it comes to participation. And for the moment, we still fail to see that, but this is something we need to keep in mind. When it comes to intersectional approach, this is really about how do we mainstream racial justice in also broader policies? How do we ensure that broader policies have an intersectional approach? How do we ensure that these policies actually don't lead to detrimental impact on Roma, don't lead to exclude Roma, to further exclude Roma? So this is something also we are working actively on, and we have actually worked a lot around the adoption of the new EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, which is a major document because it's for the first time, at least on paper, it's acknowledging institutional and structural forms of racism for all racialized groups. So it's a very interesting document, and definitely there we need to ensure there is an intersectional approach when it comes to racism, ensuring that all groups are actually, all the issues of different groups are addressed. And part of the EU action plan is also about ensuring the mainstreaming, and anyway, also in the EU framework. So how do we ensure that all EU policies are actually mainstreaming racial justice, mainstreaming the fight against anti-Gypsyism? And there, with this new EU action plan against racism, there is also the establishment of a framework for national action plan against racism. And here it's very important also to see how this national action plan against racism and the Roma strategies will also be linked and will reinforce each other. And the NAPA framework could definitely bring more to the strategies to tackle structural racism, considering all the promises it has, at least on paper. And I will just end here just to say that it's crucial that we really have this broader approach on structural racism impacting different kinds of minorities, because that's also where solidarity can definitely be a strong tool to ensure that there is this reconciliation, there is this truth coming up, there is this understanding of the common oppression of all groups. And again, here, even with this project, I think Roma are leading the way to ensure that racism is rooted out from Europe, and to ensure that we really have strong policies and strong legislation against racism for all racialized groups.
Thank you very much, Julie. This was again amazing, another amazing intervention in having us understand what are the important elements, but also the progress that we have achieved so far in tackling anti-Gypsyism as a specific form of racism at EU level. It's very true that it's a unique experience for us as civil society who have all mobilized and pushed for at national or EU level to make sure that within this new EU framework, anti-Gypsyism is going to be addressed as a core root cause of the social exclusion, and not the other way around. And the solidarity that you talked about, we will come back to it in the discussion, because I think there's more there that we can gain from mentioning and discussing it. So thank you very much, Julie. I would now like to move quickly to our next speaker, who is Mrs. Marietta Herford. She's the director of Irena Mensa International Network of Roma and non-Roma volunteers and voluntary service, an organization creating opportunities for non-formal education, dialogue, and engagement in order to address and tackle stereotypes and racism. I think it's so important to have you here today with us, Marietta, also to look into the perspective of youth and the youth movement and civil society, and also the contribution that they have made to the whole conversation of tackling anti-Gypsyism, but also advocating for truth and reconciliation processes and the obstacles within. So you have the floor, and go ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to represent our network and to share a bit the work of our network and young people, and especially Roma youth organizations. There are many things I could share here today, because our network have been very engaged in the last 2-3 years on advocacy work, especially when it comes to advocating for Roma youth issues in youth policies, or Roma youth issues in Roma policies as well. So to raise a bit more the awareness of the involvement of Roma youth issues in all policies, to let's say, and of the double mainstreaming approach. But because also one of the results of this advocacy work was that we realized that there is so much a need of raising the voice of young Roma people, and especially to give a better picture of their situation, because let's say this was a lot missing for policymakers, especially to understand the situation of young Roma people in Europe. And data collection was also a lot missing, so we decided that as part of our Roma Youth Voices project, we conduct a bigger, a more large-scale survey or research about the challenges, needs, and opportunities of young Roma people in Europe, and from different perspectives. So between 2019 and 2010, we conducted surveys to identify the main needs and concerns and opportunities for civic and political participation of young Roma, but also to understand how self-mobilization works, what are the best practices, approaches of Roma youth participation, but also to assess NGOs' capacity and what are the needs and challenges in working with young Roma youth and young Roma people by the NGO perspective. So we conducted surveys with 290 young Roma people from EU member states. These were online individual surveys, and the responses came mostly from, or the biggest numbers came from Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Spain, and the respondents being between 19 and 24 years old. And the NGO online survey collected 33 responses from Roma and pro-Roma organizations from EU member states. And we also conducted focus group interviews with young Roma from Hungary, Spain, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Ukraine, Albania, Macedonia, and Kosovo. And this was very important because we...
Sorry, can I just interrupt and ask all of us to just pace ourselves a little bit so that interpreters have a easier life to translate? Thank you so much.
Sorry. So also these surveys and focus groups interviews showed us that the main challenges for Roma youth are basically racism and discrimination. So for instance, 73% of respondents of the individual surveys showed us that racism and discrimination are the main concerns, and which was followed by access to education, training, schooling, employment, and participation in public and social life, and also hate crime and hate speech. It was also very important that these surveys shows that 95% of the respondents said that they have observed and encountered discriminatory words, behaviors, or gestures directed to Roma. And they have encountered racism while attending school and university. 68% of them reported that. So these are, when it comes to this 95%, it's a very high number and very saying a lot to us. We also asked what motivates Roma youth to participate in public life, and basically the biggest motivation for them is the idea that they can be part of changing things, and the racism what they or people they know have encountered. So especially it is important to mention that while they are experiencing a lot of racism and discrimination against them or their peers or their families or people they know around, it also motivates them to participate and to tackle all forms of discrimination and racism. There were many other important pillars which I'm not able to present at this stage, but you can read the report soon and the whole aspects. But just to conclude, basically from all these reports and researches, the top 5 barriers for Roma youth participation turned out to be the lack of space for Roma youth in the mainstream youth structures. And also we ask, for instance, NGOs and young people if they are familiar with how the policy is made. And it turned out that 90% of the NGOs believes that young Roma are not familiar with policy making. One of the other big barrier is the lack of trust by young people in state and public institutions, which I don't think it's only a Roma youth issue, but a youth issue in general. One other big issue is the negative social attitudes toward young people in general, insufficient resources, and the minimal power given to young people to initiate change. And based on these conclusions, we tried to come up with some kind of recommendations to institutions, not just on EU, but also on national level. So for instance, make Roma youth a strategic priority on international, European, national, and local level agendas. Ensure their participation in decision-making processes in all levels, but also to provide capacity building opportunities for Roma youth participation, both for individuals and both for the Roma youth organizations, and to empower Roma youth to be at the forefront of fighting anti-Gypsyism. And also that mainstream and Roma NGOs should increase and diversify their activities, targeting and involving young Roma, because the young Roma are also a diverse group and having also different needs, and to increase the participation of Roma youth and Roma youth organization in mainstream structures. And based on these elements, we are also trying to build up in the next period our let's say advocacy strategies. I know it's very brief and very, little points which mentioned now, but I think this is something that it's basically shows the reality what we are also have been fighting for and how we also plan a bit more or our work. And sorry to take longer time, I could continue it for half an hour more, but it's really just a hint of the work we are trying to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marietta. And definitely we will have some time also to go a little bit deeper within the discussion. I would like to invite again those following us to ask a question or to make their comments within the chat and chat function of this window. I think, Marietta, it was very important bring the perspective of youth and how they position themselves vis-a-vis the topic of today's discussion, and also the invitation you have made towards all of us to make sure that we always take into account the youth perspective and more so involve them directly within the policy dialogue. So thank you very much for that. I will now move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Pedro Aguilera. He's the director of FAGIC, Federación de Asociaciones Gitanas de Cataluña. He is also FAGIC is also one of the national coordinators of the CHACHIPEN project in Spain, where they coordinate the national capacity building, the coalition building process, and working towards developing joint advocacy plans and training with the civil society partners as well. Pedro, maybe you can also speak a little bit about the project and your role within, but maybe also about all of that within the context of what is going now at national level in terms of the government designing the new Roma strategies, and maybe if there is no time now, but we can follow up within our discussion some of the links that we can make within other countries where there are good practices where we are trying to learn from, such as Germany and Sweden. But you don't have to go in all of the details. We can follow up a little bit later in the discussion. Thank you very much to first.
Thank you very much, Isabella, for your presentation. It is a pleasure to be here. As you said a few moments ago, FAGIC, congratulations for your Spanish and how you speak, Federación de Asociaciones Gitanas de Cataluña. is one of the members, one of the partners of CHACHIPEN project, and we are very proud to be part of it. Before starting, let me see, for those who are not in contact with us, who we are. FAGIC is an umbrella organization with almost 100 Roma local organizations affiliated in this umbrella. There are 3 different topics that we are addressing during our daily work in favor of our main active, which are the Roma organization, which is promote empowerment of local organizations, to give to Roma community the opportunity to improve their life. But the last but not the least, one of the most important is to develop and promoting advocacy actions in different levels, such as national level, regional level, and local level. I would like to invest next minutes in my first presentation to focus in the main challenges that one organization or organizations which are similar like FAGIC has to attempt during the next years in order to try to implement it or to developing the new strategic and connected with, linked with CHACHIPEN project. First of all, I would like to say you that probably Spain is one of the most decentralized countries in Europe, with more than 3 or 4 levels of public administration, depending the national, the regional, the local, and in different regions there is a intermediate level of public administration who is in charge of different topics connected with Roma issues. So for us, it's quite important in this main challenge to include both items, anti-Gypsyism and truth and reconciliation actions during the next period in the political agenda, taking in consideration that the regional level has the possibility to implement the public policies and to promote.
Pardon, Pedro, can you just slow down a little bit? Thank
sorry.
you.
No, Luis told me that it's fine. Sorry. And the main idea is that it is quite important to spread out from the national level to the regional, local level those policies. There is another how do you say, a special character or a special input at the Spanish citizenship as well, or among the Spanish population, that is as Ismael said during the morning session, it is quite important to develop the democratic memory activities. But please bear in mind that we have to change the meaning of the democratic memory, because when we are talking about democratic memory in Spain, 95% of Spaniards think about the civil war and the situation of the last civil war, not on reconciliation of minority group who has been suffered racism and anti-Gypsyism problems in the last centuries or decades. And it is one of the points that we have to include in the agenda, and it is a specific point of view in the next period. The other one that for us is quite important is to link. Sorry, I need to put is to link the to include all the actors from the beginning in the implementation of the public policy. It means that it should be focused on Roma, including the Roma, with the Roma, by the Roma. It's not a kind of situation of a split off public policies only for Roma by Roma, but usually Roma people, we are final consumers of the public policy, and we have to be just at the beginning of the public policy in the next taking advantage of the situation of the main principle of the new strategy 2030, that it is to focus in the center the Roma in all the implementation actions. Another point that it is important for FAGIC in the next challenge is to move from social affairs to social justice, as Ilius Rostas and Gabriela said during the morning session. It is necessary to move to create a kind of scheme more developing in the process of providing social justice instead of paternalist political voice in the local and the regional level in Spain. And finally, I would like to share with you something that I used to call to avoid Instagram or Snapchat Roma policies at the local or regional level. What I mean with this kind of Snapchat or Instagram Roma policies? Let me put an example. In Catalonia, there are the Catalan Parliament has approved in the last 10 years different visibility days for Roma people. That's good. That's right, and it's a kind of obligation to approve. It's a recognition. But the most important for us is what is the next? What happened? What is behind this recognition? Because sometimes happen that after the 26th of November, which is the Catalan Roma Day, nothing happened. But Instagram and Snapchat is full plan with politicians making pictures and saying that it is important to celebrate those days. But what happened the 27th and the next days? Nothing at the political area, nothing at the public policy, and I really think that it is important to develop this to avoid this kind of public recognitions if there is nothing behind the agenda. So for those comments, we are very happy to be part of CHACHIPEN program. We are very happy to give or to share with all the partners our experience, our knowledge, and to learn each other in how to fashion these challenges during the next 2 years and beyond. That's all. I don't know if I am running out of time, but that's all.
It's perfect.
Okay.
Perfect, Pedro. Thank you so much for your wonderful intervention and some of the aspects you have raised. We will get back to them a little bit later. Now I would like to introduce our sixth speaker, who is Mr. Adrian Tudor, the president of Asociația Fast Forward, which is also a national coordinator in Romania under the CHACHIPEN project. Adrian, I would not raise the same things as for Pedro, because it's basically similar roles. I will just quickly give you the floor and let you have your intervention. Mulțumesc frumos.
Mulțumesc, Isabella. Well, thank you for this opportunity and this great honor to be to be part of this project, to be part of the CHACHIPEN project. Asociația Fast Forward is a small association, but we are in this because of my experience and my colleagues' experience, Mr. Dr. Ciprian Necula. We are both activists in multiple Roma-centered organization and movements, such as we are activists in RSL, we work with other organizations. So our experience in developing this network of Roma, and we already have this network of Roma widespread in Romania, and also in developing winning coalitions is important. I would say in Romania. I am here to speak on behalf of in the place of Mr. Ciprian Necula, so I will be much shorter. Romania was considered until recently an island of stability, surrounded by countries that have anti-European governments. Right now, the climate seems to be a bit different. Right now, we have in our parliament an extreme right party with big numbers and increasing numbers of supporters, some of their supporters even being Roma. We cannot understand how the nationalistic discourse managed to get in Roma communities and vote for extreme right parties. Romania really has big problems with anti-Gypsyism. As my colleague Florin Manole said in the last panel, we already have an anti-Gypsyism law put into law in Romania, started this year, but we do not think it is enough, because anti-Gypsyism sentiment is greatly increasing in Romania because of this COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen a surge in anti-Roma sentiment because of this pandemic. The media walked all over Roma and used them as scapegoats for everything that was wrong. Romania has one of the biggest migration crises in the world right now, because we are second after Syria in the numbers of people migrating from Romania, over 4 million people. Most of these people are Roma, and somehow the national government and some majority Romanians thought that the problem is the problem of Roma, as they are thinking about it, is going away because they have left to France, to Germany, to UK. So now it is their problem. Well, seeing the pandemic of COVID and the return of a lot of these people back to Romania, some including Roma, the anti-Roma sentiment grew a lot, and it appeared a lot in the media, and we had a lot of work in this field, because we've written a lot of petitions to the CNCD, the National Commission for Combating Discrimination against politicians, against TV news networks, also to the CNA, the Council for the National Council for Audiovisual. All of these came out with penalties against the racist statements of politicians and TV stations. The situation is very hard right here, because we've had 500 years of Roma slavery in Romania. After these 500 years of Roma slavery, came the World War II extermination of Roma. After that, we had the 45-year period of communism that forced assimilation of Roma, trying to erase Roma history, Roma culture. So reconciliation, should not be taken too lightly in the situation of Roma in Romania. We have to do this. So this is why I am honored to be part of this, because reconciliation is something that we fight for. And we want to build these coalitions, and we want to build these networks of Roma, to take their power, to take their voice, and start standing up for our Roma communities. An IRES poll in Romania showed that 7 out of 10 Romanians do not trust Roma. We do not have clear reasons for all of this, except populist dialogue, sensational news, and all of the history of oppression and discrimination against Roma in Romania. I would like to stop here because I do not have anything more to add that my colleagues did not yet speak.
Thank you so much, Adrian. This was so powerful what you said, and I just want to reiterate it. It's when you said that in Romania we do not take lightly reconciliation. It's almost like we don't have a choice, do we? So so it's really, that's why I think this event is so important, that we all kind of try and think of how all our different work in addressing anti-Gypsyism or fighting racism across Europe can actually be linked to how we can then all find ways to better reconcile with the past of Roma, but also reconcile in the present with wider society, because there is still there, we can see traces of all that negative. I think my internet connection is not very good. I apologize for it. We have a number of questions also that have been asked in the chat and also within the Q&A function. I would like to again raise this one that was raised in the chat. I don't, some of you probably just me got it, but back to George and the ERC. George, because your work is so much linked to defending the rights of Roma before the courts, but you also mentioned the tremendous work you do to empower activists, civil societies, and communities to step forward, to learn how to defend their own rights on their own. But then how do you see your role and contribution to the CHACHIPEN process of bringing forward this just social justice and making the bridge to transitional justice approach? How would you see your role as ERC in that?
Yeah, so as I said, apart from strategic litigation, which we do at the court, we also have rights-based advocacy and human rights education. So from that perspective, ERC has a very interesting project that is has some similarities with your project, and that is that in Ukraine, Turkey, Serbia, and Albania, maybe some other country, maybe Macedonia, I'm not quite sure. We have a group of volunteers who are working with ERC, and first year of their work was on challenging anti-Gypsyism online. So we have provided a training for these people to first understand and recognize what is the hate speech, you know, and what is hate crime and how this happens online. And what their action first is to find this content on internet and to report it, or to take further steps, you know, like contacting platforms and contacting relevant national authorities who are there to regularize the content of internet and diminish the hate speech. So this is, for example, one action that is not strictly litigation. It still has a rights-based approach, because whenever we are contacting these platforms or whenever we are contacting the authorities saying them what was wrong with this hate speech, we are always citing law that should prohibit online hate speech. And now we are thinking about extending this project, where it will be extended to the perspective that we will add a litigation component to it as well.
Thank you so much, Georgia, for this. We have a number of questions, so let's see how well we can do. Julie, I don't know if you were able to look into the chat. There are a number of questions there for you. So would you like to address any of those questions and maybe just repeat the one that you would like to address?
Yes, sure. So I've seen one, so I'm not sure if there are several. But there is one on the, so should I read it or?
Yeah? Okay. Yes, for those ones.
Yeah, so the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan talks indeed about structural racism, tackling the underlying problem. But when you see the specific actions laid down, only more data and the role of media in raising awareness are highlighted. The effective enforcement of current EU non-discrimination law and the more general rule of law upholding in the context of the treaty and the rule of law mechanism are not included. So how then to effectively ensure state-led anti-Gypsyism? This is a question that has been sent to me directly, so I hope this was. So regarding that, actually, I mean, as soon as the Anti-Racism Action Plan had been published, we had already reserved about. So as I said, the framing is good and it's quite unprecedented in the way it's actually recognized institutional racism. But at the same time, the action plan is really failing in really proposing strong measures to actually address that. Because also it has been quite a rush process, and there is still a lot of, I mean, it's opening a lot of boxes that still need to be filled. But in many areas, including on equality data collection, including on policing, we really fail to see strong measures. And also when it comes to participation, as I was mentioning, and also mainstreaming, again, here it's acknowledged as important, but there is no strong processes that are being mentioned. So this is also part of our advocacy at the moment, is to actually have strong processes in place at EU level, but also when we work at national level with National Action Plan Against Racism, to ensure that civil society, racialized groups, including Roma, are really included from the beginning in the processes, to ensure that there is strong mechanism to have an intersectional approach in different policies, and this is still lacking. When it comes to the rule of law and the implementation of EU non-discrimination legislation, so there has been a new evaluation report of the directives issued on the day of the EU summit 2 weeks ago, which actually outlining specific gaps, and hopefully this will be a basis for strong follow-up action by the Commission, who is actually the guardian of legislation and the treaty. So we hope that there will be strong actions. We've heard that there were like a number of infringement procedures being launched against some member states. And also when it comes to rule of law, I mean, there is now this new mechanism at the EU level with this annual report on rule of law. And here it's definitely an important leverage for civil society to ensure that anti-racism is also included in this report. Especially because this is also one of our concerns, that the protection of human rights defenders, the protection of civil society working on anti-racism. Because we talk about participation, but at the same time, it's very paradoxical to see that the threats against civil society is actually going higher. So how can we call for meaningful participation and at the same time allow member states to actually attack civil society? So that's also, this rule of law mechanism should also also mainstream anti-racism, mainstream the protection of anti-racist civil society, and could be an important also leverage for this.
Thank you very much, Julie. I have a question that maybe Timea would like to answer from ERIAC. It's from Miko. It's about the fact that we don't, as he says here, we are discussing here something that is very far from thinking of Roma on grassroots level. How do we have to build the self-esteem of these people who are not willing, even in census, to mark that they are Roma? And this is the biggest problem, which now I see in practice, how we will change this narrative in Roma communities who are ashamed of what they are. Would you like to take this one?
Sure, Isabella, I may try. Also, this is the question, you know, with which everything is interconnected with. When we speak about the lack of infrastructure for Roma cultural production, we also need to recognize that, you know, the market and the industry of arts and culture require, it's really you know, a competition for the audience. And we really need to make sure that Roma cultural producers have access to this infrastructure. Otherwise, we cannot really compete in a competent and state-of-the-art manner. And without this, we will not be able to convince those who are dealing with issues of self-doubt, who have certain traumas connected to their identity, and those who believe what the majority has taught them, which is that Roma are dealing with a history of victimhood and are unable to overcome a history of traumatization and victimization. So while we are working on changing the narratives, it's also of utmost importance to have really high quality infrastructure so we can convince those who are simply looking for the highest quality standards in arts and culture. This is the ERIAC experience. This is one of the founding principles of ERIAC as well.
Thank you so much, Timea. This is very useful. And because we are running a bit out of time, and I have asked for permission just to give ourselves a round of just 30 to 40 seconds maybe for last word, so that everybody can say something, something that you were not able to address in our intervention, or last thoughts before I then give the floor for the next panel. For the questions that were not asked, I will ask those ones asking those questions to please contact us by email, and we'll try to address them one by one. Thank you so much. Who would like to start? Maybe I start from Pedro, because he's here in the left side of the panel, in the window for me.
Thank you, Isabella. Well, I would like to say something related to the Roma Day and the 50th anniversary of the Roma World Congress, which was a key milestone in the life of most of Roma people around Europe in 1971 and the following generations as my generation. It was a kind of inspiration for us to be in the fight day by day, and celebrating that every day for us is the 8th of April.
Thank you so much. Marietta, would you like to follow?
Yeah, then I would like to continue where Pedro just finished, and we just discussed the same issue in the last few weeks, like how to also emphasize around April 8th that, of course, we are really happy to follow the previous generations, because they are also, as Pedro said, are the inspirations for us. Really to take into account what we can learn from them, but also how to empower our youngsters, because they will be, you know, our future leaders. And in 50 years, they will reflect back what they have achieved. And, you know, they will be the ones with whom we return back as our you know, allies. So yeah, I think this is such an important moment to have these kind of generational discourses, what we are really happy to support and to emphasize.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marietta. Julie, last words?
Yes, I would like to say that as INA, we really like support these efforts, and we will make our best also to ensure that mainstreaming of the fight against anti-Gypsyism is not only in anti-racism policies, but also in the anti-racist movement, because this is also what we also have sometimes a lack of understanding of these issues in the anti-racist movement. And in order to build stronger solidarity, because this is something I have not had not seen the full question actually when it comes to state-led racism, that is actually increasing when we actually have a broader now a bit more recognition, but at the same time it's increasing. So one of the solutions is really to be stronger together when it comes to the fight against racism, and really this we try to continue to do that. Also, thanks to the work of the Alliance Against Anti-Gypsyism that I forgot to mention, the really important work that had been done with the Alliance and the working definition, the reference paper. So this is something we will continue to do.
Thank you so much, Julie. Adrian, would you like to follow as well?
I will be very short again. I just really have hope in this alliance, and I really have hope that together we can do something for the Roma in all of our states, because Roma are an European nation. We live in the whole Europe. Europe is our country, so we have to work together to solve the problems of our brothers and sisters, and we have to work together to find reconciliation for everything that was that history did bad for our ancestors. So now it is time to act. It is time to come together. Thank you very much.
Nice to you, Adrian. This is very well said. Timea, would you say something as well? We don't hear you. You are muted. Yes.
I will depend on what where Adrian just left off, building on hope, paraphrasing our elder Nikolai Georgiev, who said to imagine and act in hope for a future of co-dependence and peaceful coexistence. We need the artists as much as the politicians. And I think this is also a basic necessity to imagine the reconciled future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Timea. And not lastly, George.
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate to everyone. Happy 8th of April. Davenju desaste baftale.
Thank you, Tetrain Savorenge. And really, it's important to also say that this whole event is also a celebration to the International Roma Day. And we are so happy to have had such an amazing opportunity to speak to you guys, all of you who are the backbone of the Roma movement. So thank you all so much. This is just the beginning of us addressing this issue much, much closer and much more united. So thank you so much to all of you and to the colleagues that have organized this event. And I will pass the floor to my colleague and boss, Gabriela.